So, as I was saying, एक पेड़ जिसकी roots are really strongly grounded into the soil, you know, a tree like that will not fall from the wind or the storm. Similarly, a person who's secure and grounded in who they are, external criticism की वजह से और external calamities की वजह से ऐसा इंसान घबराएगा नहीं और टूटेगा तो बिल्कुल भी नहीं. You know, through many years of research, we now know that a very strong sense of self and especially our self-esteem is established very early on in life. For most of us, our self-esteem is established as early as age 5. And a lot of us have very, very low self-esteem very early on in life. So basically, if you were treated with love, kindness, and respect growing up, you will see yourself as someone who's worthy of those things. You know, you'll expect love, kindness, and respect from other people. And for those of us that grew up without those wonderful things, ever wonder why you keep dating losers that don't treat you right? Somebody's been accepting the love they think they deserve. But it's fine. Happens to the best of us. I myself, for one, grew up believing that I was ugly, unworthy, and unlovable for most of my life. Not because anything was necessarily wrong with me, I was a perfectly well human being, but only because I was, well, different. You see, I, Ella Dev Verma, was born Dev Verma. I was my parents' firstborn and their only son. Now, मेरे parents के बहुत सपने थे कि उनका बेटा बड़े होके क्या बनेगा, and something tells me a beauty queen wasn't on their list, but life happens, you know. Since the very beginning, my sense of self has been deeply feminine. Whether that be, you know, my preferences, my choices, or later on in life, my secondary sex characteristics, I've always felt more comfortable in the feminine side of things. But I'm not going to start from here, we're going to start from the beginning. So I was raised in a joint family where toxicity was part of the routine. Toxicity that I only now realize was toxic because अब जाके मैंने बाहर की दुनिया देखी and I've lived outside of those walls. So I realized that it was a little messed up. I've only recently learned that it's actually not normal for people to constantly scream at you. It's also not normal for adults to raise hands on children out of their own frustration. And the biggest shocker to me was realizing that actually you don't have to be miserable all the time just to make everybody around you happy. I didn't learn that for the longest time. You see, for most of us, we forget to see our family, especially our parents, as human beings. In this country, parents and mothers especially are expected to be gods. They're supposed to be this always available, hyper-loving sources of life and femininity that make no mistake and aren't human. But the reality is, before any of us are parents, grandparents, caregivers, lovers, or providers, we're all humans, and humans make mistakes. Some of us had unavailable parents. Some of us had overindulgent parents that had a lot of opinions. Some of us had overindulgent extended relatives who always wanted you to be fairer, taller, smarter, and faster than the entire world. The sad part is that it is often the people that we love most that make us feel unlovable. The thing is, no, सीधी बात है. Now in your life, if somebody comes to you and hurts you in profound ways, whether that be physically, emotionally, socially, psychologically, financially, whatever, you will have the capacity to look at that person and say, this person hurt me and that was their fault. That was something wrong that they did. The sad bit is, children do not have that kind of capacity. So when children are hurt by someone, it is easier for children to blame themselves and believe that they somehow deserve the bad things that happen to them instead of blaming aggressors, abusers, or whatever the source of their misery is. That's what I did as well. I internalized a lot of bad things that were done to me, and my low self-esteem was established very early on in life. You know, it starts at home, it starts with our upbringing. And this I'm not good enough mindset that I picked up because of whatever my circumstances were was a mindset that I carried with me in every sphere of life. When I went to school as a feminine child, a very talented feminine child, I pursued a lot of co-curriculars. I had a lot of hobbies, I had a lot of talents, but obviously everything I did had a slight bit of femininity in it, because that is who I am as a human being. That doesn't go away. I've tried. My father made me do a couple push-ups. It did not work. So when I was dancing, it was feminine. When I would speak, it was feminine. When I would act on stage, it was feminine. And femininity, ek to is society mein वैसे ही nobody respects. And secondly, when it comes from a source where masculinity was supposed to come from, I was a boy at that time, I'm a transgender person, it was looked down upon even more. But what went wrong? Because of the way that I was raised and I thought about myself, instead of realizing that people making fun of me or saying bad things to me was actually their lack of sensitivity towards diversity in the world, I started to believe that something was inherently wrong with me, or wrong with the things that I like to do and be. And of course, this isn't just an inner conflict. Bahar se bhi cheezein ho rahi hain. I'm not making this up. There's obviously bullying and name calling from classmates and schoolmates. There's also stuff happening at home. Everybody has drama at home. It's fine. And sometimes even teachers would bully me. So my life was pretty miserable, and I was suffering constantly. But the truth is, most of us are suffering constantly. And most of us will continue to suffer constantly. That's just how life is. But what makes it worse is believing that you are worthy of the suffering that's coming your way. This maladaptive portrait you paint of yourself in your mind as someone who's incompetent and unworthy of love and goodness will literally eat away not only at your life, but at your happiness and your potential. What I mean by that is, when I got out of school, and I started to see the professional world, I would have so many professional opportunities coming toward my way, and you know what I would do? I would say no. People would ask me, do you want to shoot for this really big campaign? And I would say, actually no, I don't think I'm fit for this. And I would continuously deny professional things. I felt so poorly about myself that when I came out to my parents, it wasn't telling them or informing them or coming out to them. It was more about apologizing to them. It was like coming clean about some crime I had committed, and now I have to admit it in front of everyone. Because obviously, I've been taught to believe that who I am is inherently something that is wrong. And so I spent my entire life apologizing for it. And when I did come out, the plan of action for my parents was to take me to doctors, which now I don't hold that against them. They did the best with what they knew, and they wanted the best for their child. So we're going from doctor to doctor, physicians who aren't really experts in this field, but happen to have a lot of opinions. And these doctors are doing a lot of unnecessary examinations. They're asking me a lot of uncomfortable questions, all of which I'm accepting with no resistance. Because again, I deserve this. But luckily, there was one doctor who directed us in the right direction and, suggested to my parents that we take this up with a therapist in therapy, see a psychologist and discuss it with that regards. Even when I went into therapy, it was very difficult for me to open up and tell them what I was feeling, because I thought I was crazy. And how do you sit across someone and tell them, actually, I'm crazy and I want you to fix me? So it took me time. It took me more sessions than most people to open up in therapy. That is also a very big misconception that we have about mental health and therapy in this country, that एक session में ठीक नहीं हुआ तो फिर पागल है, या फिर एक session में ठीक नहीं हुआ तो पैसा waste. It takes time for people to open up and accept themselves. But eventually, session after session, layer after layer, I did come to terms with who I was, and I looked my transgender identity right in the eye. And I got my diagnosis for gender dysphoria at the time when I was 14. This was also around the time, 14, 15, when I'm going through puberty. Puberty is particularly difficult for transgender children because our bodies are developing in a way that isn't natural for us. So me, for example, I've always felt and identified as a woman, but my body is developing in ways that are of a man. Now, I simply want all of you to imagine, the people that identify as men in this room, or biological males. Imagine if you woke up tomorrow with a pair of breasts. That would be a little bit uncomfortable. Or the women in this room, if you woke up tomorrow with a beard, it would throw you off, right? That's basically what my life was for 4 more years. Because in my country, I was legally supposed to wait till 18 before I could take hormone blockers and start hormone replacement therapy. That's basically what I did. I waited it out. And it seems like a very easy process that, okay, now you have a diagnosis, you know what to do about it, and it's just a matter of time before things fall into place. But waiting it out was also not very easy. There were continuous attempts from my family and my parents in hopes of trying to fix me or change me. Like I said, my father thought that he could, make me exercise with my cousins, and maybe a few push-ups will make a man out of me. He couldn't make a son, but उनकी भी तारीफ करनी पड़ेगी, काफ़ी तगड़ी बेटी बनाई है उन्होंने. And a relative looked me in the eye and she said to me, "You're actually never going to be beautiful. No one's going to love you, and you're never going to look like a woman." I should tell you, she has a clothing brand that I now model for. Things changed. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting. And the plan was that as soon as I'm done with my school, I'm going to go to Australia. Because I have family in Australia, my moss is there, and that's a society that's accepting of things like this. So making a life there would have been easier. But right about the time when my school was ending was when COVID came around. There was lockdown. And in my family, we have businesses. Businesses and COVID did not really get along. And so financially, our savings were gone and we couldn't afford Australia anymore. So what I did was I transitioned in lockdown at home. Now this is a very important detail, right? I want all of you to imagine this with me. 15, 16 years of your life, you've lived basically being a joke, right? Changing yourself continuously, not feeling good enough, having people be mean to you, having people laugh at you. Then suddenly this big virus comes along and you're stuck in your home. And you change only really external things about yourself. I started transitioning. And then you come out of your home a very conventionally attractive woman, and suddenly everything that you couldn't do before, now not only you can do, but also people love it. लोग तालियां बजा बजा के, सीटियां बजा बजा के रुक ही नहीं रहे हैं. Now it's not wrong for me to do makeup. Now it's not wrong for me to be feminine. But what's wrong is I've gotten very comfortable with my suffering. मुझे suffering का बहुत शौक है. मैं suffer कर करके यहाँ तक आई हूँ, and it's my comfort zone now. Now that I was, void of people saying bad things to me, I was doing it for them. I internalized their narratives, and everything that they used to say to me, I was now saying to myself. I was pushing things away. People would compliment me and I'd be like, "Arey nahi nahi, ye to wo hai, ye to wo hai." I would, get guys hitting on me, and in romantic relationships, I would push people away because I didn't feel worthy of love. And obviously professional spaces, as talented and as beautiful as I was getting a lot of offers very early on in my career. But again, not feeling good enough for them made me push them away because again, a painted portrait of not being good enough was being carried in my mind all the way through. That was life for some time. And it took me, continuously going out and actively unlearning everything that I've ever learned. It's so crazy to me that a lot of us, we will live our lives being what somebody else expects us to be, thinking what the other people expect us to think, being what they want us to be, thinking what they want us to think, saying what they want us to say, not being authentic at all. Ask yourself when you go home, what were you before they told you who you were? Every insecurity that a human being has a root. None of us were ugly before that first time somebody called you ugly. None of us were not good enough before that first time somebody told you you weren't good enough. Hate, insecurities, every negative emotion is taught, and it's a matter of really actively taking time with yourself, reflecting on your life, and unlearning all these narratives that other people apply to you. Stepping out of the portraits that people forced you in. वैसे भी abstract art का ज़माना है. Boring portraits don't go anywhere. And that's what I did. I started from a blank canvas and I asked myself, एला की गलती कहाँ थी? अगर 3-4 साल के बच्चे को someone is hurting, there is no reason that child deserves it. I couldn't have possibly done something to turn an adult off to the point where they raise a hand on me. If I go to school and people are making fun of me who don't know me, people I've never spoken to are laughing at me as I walk down the corridor, they have no reason to hate me. They're doing it because their friend is also doing it. So it wasn't my fault. And realizing that, this is a frustrating lesson, realizing that it doesn't necessarily take being a bad person for bad things to happen to you was a very morbid but very important lesson that I had to learn. You could be good, you could be kind, you could be all the good things in the world, but if kismat kharab hai to ho jati hain cheezein. The trick is to not blame yourself and keep grinding, keep growing. And that's when I gave myself the chance that my circumstances didn't give me. I gave those interviews. I gave that TED talk. I gave that interview and I got on that stage for that pageant. First runner-up right here. And it's really about prospering in life. People think that the biggest thing that you have to offer as human beings is expertise and perfection. But what I learned is the greatest thing that all of us have to offer is actually authenticity. And that is what this system actively kills. Society, the education system, your relatives, everything works on making a version of you that is so far from your authentic self. Somebody who thinks like the textbooks, talks like the news, walks like the society standards. They want to make you robots, and I don't know if I'm ready to be like that. That's what they do. In name of advancement, they're talking about making robots more human-like. सोफिया को भी सिटीजनशिप दे रखी है उन्होंने, मेरे को नहीं देंगे. मेरे डॉक्यूमेंट्स नहीं चेंज कर रहे, मेरा आधार चेंज करने में उनको प्रॉब्लम आ रही है, मेरा पासपोर्ट चेंज करने में प्रॉब्लम आ रही है. A robot has more respect than a transgender person in this society, and that is something that I cannot accept. And I won't stop until the day that doesn't change. And it is what it is. It's also a really difficult part of healing that comes along, which is guilt and frustration. Even now that I'm doing great things, I feel like a loser. Sometimes I feel like I wasted a lot of time. I wasted a lot of the time not thinking that I was good enough. क्यों मैंने उसको हाँ बोलने में इतना time लगाया? क्यों मैंने वो interview देने में इतना time लगाया? I was always good, but you have to be kind to yourself. That is one of the most important things in life. You have to speak to yourself kindly. They want you to believe that, grind, mehnat. Do it when you don't feel like it. Do everything that doesn't make you happy, and then you're going to be successful. Maybe. And I did that. I put my feelings aside. I put my authenticity aside. और बहुत validation मिली मेरे को. बहुत तारीफ़ें मिली, from people. But what's it all worth if I don't feel complete in the end? The emptiness doesn't go away if you try to fill it by other people's validation. Remember that. That's never going to happen. So really, authenticity is what matters most in life. And, stepping out of the portraits that people have put you in. People often, say to me, because I can't have biological children, just the way that things have turned out. People say to me that, you've ended your bloodline. You've ended your lineage. But I ask them, how have I done that? मेरे तो हर आशिक में मेरा अंश है. Every person that I've even looked at, I'm alive in. Not in terms of my DNA, but in terms of something far greater, which is my essence and the love that I give them. And that is what we have as human beings. The greatest gift to offer to the world is love. Our truest legacy, our truest lineage is not our last name, it's not our DNA, it's love, happiness, and your essence. Do not let that essence die out trying to fit into portraits that are so boring, not even outlined, expressionless. Color outside of the lines. Be yourself and give yourself the chance to prosper, because trust me, the only thing that's holding yourself back for a lot of you right now is this guy, and you're in charge. Don't let this take over. Be yourself, be authentic, grow, and prosper. Thank you.